Hey everyone, it's OSK. Welcome to another episode of Spellbreak Academy, episode 6 this time, about movement. This will be a nice little guide, nice little advanced tips for you guys on how to improve your Spellbreak movement, and hopefully this will put some thoughts in your head and get you thinking about what kind of things you want to be doing while you're engaging different players in the HoloLens, and also how you want to be moving within those engagements and also without them. So without further ado, let's get into Spellbreak Academy episode 6 for movement. Hopefully this will be a bit of a shorter guide. By the way, if you like what you're seeing and if you like it by the end of the video, please be sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel for more advanced Spellbreak guides. I'll be having some more beginner friendly stuff coming out to kind of, pave the way for chapter 2 release. But once that all is out of the way, we'll be back right into the advanced stuff, and I'll even have a few player spotlights, and we'll be highlighting some great things there. But without further ado, again, get into Spellbreak Academy episode 6 for movement. Now, starting off, we're going to be going over the overview. New slide I added, contrary to the previous 5 episodes here. Just give you a brief overview of what we're talking about here. Moving with a purpose, burning resources, tricks and techniques. It should be tricks, not trick. Tracking your opponent's movement, and predictive action. All 5 of these things I have specifically pointed out so that you guys can, just kind of get your noggin jogging about what exactly you want to be doing with each and every bit of movement that Spellbreak gives you, whether it be resource intensive or whether it just be your base movement. So without further ado, moving with a purpose. Basically, what this does, or what this describes, is making sure you don't autopilot. It's so easy to get into your games, turn off your brain, and then, just kind of let your fingers do whatever they want to do. So many times I see this, even in competitive play, sometimes you'll see an engagement going on, and it's like they do a little dance. They do a little rotational dance kind of thing. And usually it's, if you're facing your opponent, they are moving to your right side, so they are rotating kind of clockwise in a way. It's kind of weird, honestly, and it's all the result of autopiloting. It's not thinking about what your next position should be. It's not thinking about, what would give you the best chance of victory in that specific scenario. So you always want to be actively thinking about the engagement, thinking what kind of high ground can I take, what kind of positioning is going to give me the best chance of success in this particular engagement. And if a third party hops in, you're going to be better equipped to deal with that third party, as opposed to if you're just out in a valley against a stone shaper, someone with a frost comes by, you're pretty much dead to rights. So don't autopilot, always avoid that, and be proactive with your movement, push the advantage and take charge. One of the easiest ways to do this is if you're running a Frost offhand or just Frostborn class in general. You want to be landing your early shots, and if you get that early health advantage, be proactive with your movement. Maybe burn a rune if you need to. But also, if you can save yourself burning a rune, try not to. You want to preserve your cooldowns. You want to make sure that you have every option available to you at all times. So if pushing the advantage is something you can do by just base movement, or positioning yourself in a way to land a follow-up snipe or a follow-up source of damage, that will be preferable to just burning a rune or burning a sorcery. And of course, if you need to, you can burn that resource, but we're going to be getting more into that in the next section here. And also strategically use your positioning and spells. This is kind of what I was touching on. Reposition for another snipe, kind of approach the enemy with cover in between you and him, but also make sure that you're keeping track of their positioning and using your spells to sort of provide a little bit of flack. One of the things that I like to do is if I tag someone with an early fireball, obviously the ignite, if I'm a pyromancer, is pretty nice. But if I know that they're going to go for a heal, I will automatically just go ahead and shoot another 2 or 3, just to make sure that they feel the pressure, they feel like they need to move, they feel like I'm approaching, and that way they don't feel like they can get a free reset off. So that way you can approach your opponent with that extra little bit of pressure, and you're in a much better position to finish out that exile. And then this last little part, try to cut your opponent off and force an action out of them. This is basically me saying try to force them to burn their rune. It's going to give you a much better position for yourself, especially if you happen to save a rune charge of your own. Let's say that you have a person cornered into a kind of a wide open area like Dust Pool, but you want to make sure that they go to one side of the map. You can put down a flame wall if you are a pyromancer or just have a fire offhand. That way they don't want to go through that firewall. They want to go the opposite direction. This is what's called a movement trap, and it's something that your opponent either has to take damage for, or it's something that they have to burn a resource for if they want to get out of there effectively. It's something that's very, very difficult to do sometimes, but it's very, very worth it if you can pull it off. Same thing, if you're using lightning, you can throw down a lightning sorcery. If you're using a toxicologist, you can throw down a cloud on them. It's not as effective, but you can. And then some classes, it's just better to go for damage. But for those that control movement, control areas, it's going to be very, very effective for you. You want to force them to take certain positions and then punish them for it, just like I was saying. Either make them burn a rune or eat a few spells. And then, of course, just make sure you're keeping those movement traps in your mind. This is one of the more difficult things to do, but I figured I'd go ahead and put this out there early. That way you're thinking about it as we're going through these next few slides. Second topic, going to be burning resources. This is all about keeping track of your own cooldowns, and it is crucial to battle strategy and tactics. So basically, this whole section can be summed up with try not to burn your resources. Basically, in Spellbreak, it's a very movement-oriented game, and the last person to burn the resources usually will be the one that come on top, unless there's some sort of dominant positioning battle going on. But more to expand on the burning your resources point, only burn a rune for a specific purpose, and very important, know why you used it. This goes back to not autopiloting. I see so many players, myself included, when I'm just chillaxing, is they'll be looking to push their advantage. They'll be looking to burn a rune, but a lot of times they don't need to. And it's really in these sort of moments where you really need to know why you use your rune. I guess I'm using it to engage, but could I have achieved the same effect by just running forward a little bit? Yes, I am fleeing, for example, but could I have done something else to where I don't need to burn a cooldown to where I can still have it available for use? This is something that you need to be thinking about, and this applies to fleeing, finishing an opponent like I just said, and also pressing the advantage. And finishing an opponent is going to be one of the exceptions to this. You can burn a rune for that if you know you're going to land your shot. Most of the time, though, especially if you're new to the spell break, it's going to be a bit of a coin toss, so you want to make sure that you're conserving your rune charge as much as possible and just landing what you know you can land. If you're running a lightning offhand, you're running conduit, and you really want to finish off an opponent, maybe instead of going for the flashy play that burns your rune, you can do it, but it'll be a lot safer if you just take a step back, line up your line of sight, and then just bolt them down with a few lightning bolts, or if you're running frost offhand, just shoot them with a frost bolt. It's really, really easy to do, and it doesn't cost you any resources. And like I said earlier, just try and conserve your resources as much as possible. And also, can you achieve the same effect without using a rune or sorcery? It's a lot easier to point out whenever you're watching a VOD back, but whenever you're in the actual moment, it's a little bit more difficult to do. That's why I want you to be actively thinking about that, so that whenever you're in the HoloLands, you'll be more prepared mentally for anything that could happen. So that way you don't have to burn a resource. Our third slide here, going to be tricks and techniques. This is mostly learned through playing the game and practicing, and one point I didn't put here, watching YouTube videos, actually. I have a few class guides you can check out here on the channel. And they all go over advanced tech and advanced tricks and techniques, and there's plenty of other videos that do the same thing. So if you're going to be one-tricking a class or just learning a class in general, make sure that you're aware of all the different tricks and techniques you can use with that. They'll go more into class tech down at the bottom there, but to get into the more general sort of tricks and techniques, sorcery canceling is a big one. It's actually pretty easy to do if you practice it a few times. It might be a little awkward at first, but once you get it the first, I'd say 5 or 10 times, usually you kind of get your timing down and you really know where it conserves momentum and where it doesn't. And like I said, conserves momentum for a brief period. This is especially useful if you are falling down from a ledge with that immediate vertical stop. If you are falling down off of a mountain, for example, and you're going really, really fast on the way down, you can actually sorcery cancel that, get that immediate momentum stop on the vertical side of things, and then you can levitate up. It's kind of weird. Like normally, if you try to levitate, it'll kind of coast you down a little bit, but if you're falling off and you get this sorcery cancel, you can almost bounce all the way back up once you use your levitation ability. And it's really, really nice. And sorcery canceling, especially for something like conserving your momentum after a dash, for example, or conserving your momentum if you're running on frozen alacrity or ice trails. That is something that's very, very useful for just holding your sorcery, getting that extra little bit of distance. You can use it to traverse the HoloLands very, very efficiently, and you also don't burn any resources while doing it. And momentum transfers, we kind of touched on dash a little bit. Basically, what I'm talking about is anything that combos into either levitation or other runes. So dash, you basically just we call it wave dash from Super Smash Brothers Melee. But anyway, you can dash on the ground where you start your dash, aim towards the ground, and then you kind of go upwards after you skid across it. And you can hold down levitation or levitating so that you can conserve that dash momentum and travel a little bit further. Same thing with Spring Step. Spring Step, everyone's been kind of yelling about or kind of complaining about. You do the same exact thing if you press Spring Step and then just immediately hold your spacebar or whatever you use to jump. That way, at the very, very end of this Spring Step momentum, you still are using it to get that levitation going, and it's very, very easy to do, and it's very, very useful as well. You can traverse a long way, especially if you have a talent like Dexterity that conserves your mana. It's very comparable actually to Flight, so it's very, very useful indeed. And of course, some class skills. Mainly what I'm talking about here is Pyromancer's Firefly. You can dash straight into it and it'll conserve its momentum. Also, Tempest makes very good use of this as well. Tempest in general is a very, very good mobility class, but you can also do things like radi hopping and just getting a little bit of boost from running a dash rune and sometimes Spring Step. So it's very, very useful for you to know these things and for you to utilize them out there. And of course, class tech with some movement, tricks, and techniques. Reclouding is a very big one on Toxicologists. Basically, you just use your Vanishing Mist more than once while your cloud's up. It's a little bit dangerous in some instances, but most of the time, if you're very, very tricky about it and you're very crafty with it, you can get a little bit of reclouding, and it might even net you some extra damage too, as well as the movement. Conduit Rune Swap. This is a special interaction that happens when you run Spellslinger on Conduit. You can pocket a rune into a slot of your inventory. You can swap to it, throw down your Lightning Strike as soon as that rune is done, and it'll refresh your cooldown. Then you're able to get out of an engagement. Very useful if you're running something like Dash initially. You need to teleport out of a specific situation. You swap your rune, throw down your Lightning Strike, and then teleport out of the action. Swap back to Dash, and it's like you always had Dash, but now you just teleported away from the action. So it's very, very nice, very useful. Bedrock cancels as well. Excuse me there. Bedrock cancels. Basically, Bedrock is it's a skill in Stone Shaper that allows you to speed up your vertical descent whenever you're using your Shockwave spell, and you can cancel it actually by either sorcery hovering, like we said earlier, or you can even fire a spell like an offhand fire or a toxic or anything that shoots an immediate spell. So Bedrock cancel is very, very good for movement mix-ups on the Stone Shaper class, and can also pair into some specific momentum transfers like with Spring Step and also with Dash. So it's very, very useful all around, and the masters of Spellbreak really love to use those Bedrock cancels, especially if they happen to play Stone Shaper. So very, very useful indeed. Moving on to tracking the opponent's movement. Bit of a shorter section, but basically the gist of this is just pay attention to micro movements and look for tendencies in your opponent. If they really like to do that rotation move that I said at the very, very beginning of the video, just keep an eye on that. Maybe use it to lead your next Fireball or lead your next Shockwave, or even Frost if you're looking for it. Also, if they really like to sidestep or crouch, you can use that to your advantage as well. Maybe try to land a Shockwave or just predict a movement just in general. And also you can see, does the opponent try to jump every time they shoot? Do they try to get a little bit of flashy movement, whatever they happen to be doing? You can use that information to then line up your next spell and even win you an exile sometimes. Mind games are a big part of Spellbreak, especially on the more advanced side. So anything that you can grab from your opponent that's going to tell you how they're going to behave is going to be very, very important for tracking their movement. You also want to look for early class and rune giveaways. If you tag anybody with an early spell, you can see what class they're running by a little icon next to their shield and health. And also, speaking of shield and health, you want to be looking at just how much of that they do have. They'll help you with engagements in general. You can also look for any rune giveaways as well. Sometimes if you're trying to snipe somebody, they will go ahead and burn a rune either to disengage or to dodge a spell. So if you can figure out what you're dealing with early on, it's going to help you with your movement later on. Also, you want to predict your opponent's movement via runes or class skills. Be prepared to use movement of your own to counteract it. Basically what I just said with the dash, if they are using it to disengage from you or use it to dodge certain spells, then you can use that knowledge for the engagement later on whenever you have to face them and try to exile them. You can say, hey, this guy has a dash. They can close the distance very fast. Depending on my kit, I might want to play this a little bit differently and use my own movement to counteract it. And also just be aware of their class skills. Like if you're a pyromancer, you're going to have access to Firefly. You'll be able to close the distance very, very fast. Also, if you see that they're toxicologists, just be aware of that extra damage that Outbreak gives you. Maybe try to keep your distance as well. Our last but not least, we're going to get into predictive movement. This is basically all the movements in the game that make the opponent more predictable and, makes it easy to line up a counteracting shot. So floaty movements, preparing sorceries, it's basically the same as sorcery canceling or sorcery floating. You get about 5 seconds whenever you want to hold down your sorcery, and this kind of pairs into that. So if they are preparing to throw a sorcery, you can usually tell by the animation that they go into. Just keep in mind that no vertical movement will be happening, and they'll only be skating side to side, so you can use that to line up a snipe. You can use that to line up a fireball or two. Peaking your levitations as well. This is a phenomenon that happens whenever you are at the top or at the peak of your levitation. A lot of newer players will just levitate all the way up, waste all their mana, and then float straight back down. You can use that kind of peak to line up your shot because there's this brief moment where they move almost horizontally and they kind of stick in the air a little bit. That's a very good opportunity to land some big damage. And also slows from frost. If they happen to be caught in any kind of ice mist or any kind of flash freeze, just know that all of their movements, including cast speed and movement speed, are going to be slowed down. They might even get frozen, which we'll talk about later. Easy follow-up for any sort of movement that you're trying to predict. Momentum locks, CC from freeze or stun. This is basically frozen. I already talked to you about that in floating movement section. Basically freeze does exactly what it says. It'll freeze you in place, but your momentum will still carry just a little bit. You won't be able to control it though. So if you're on the way up, if you get frozen, then you'll immediately start dropping down, just like if you were from levitating or anything like that. So you can use that to predict a quick little frost snipe or even toxic slap or fireball. Stunning's kind of the same thing. You can still move around basically, but you won't be able to use runes. So being able to notice that on your opponent to where they can't dodge in a very, very quick way, going to be very important for you to land some free shots. Also, sorcery canceling, it's a blessing and a curse, like I said earlier. If you know that your opponent's going to be sorcery canceling a lot, you can maybe try to predict out when they might try to do it, and then you can land a free fireball or a frost as well. And then lastly, cooldown timing. This is probably one of the most important topics in Spellbreak as far as combat is concerned, but also movement as well. It'll help inform when you want to use your own movement. Basically, what you want to be doing is noticing which resources that they're using, whether it be rune or sorceries, and then you want to kind of have a mental image of whatever timing on the cooldown is for whichever rune that you have to be up against. Like for teleport, it's about 13 seconds. For dash, it's 4.5 seconds on base. And you want to be keeping these timings in your head at all times so that if you do have an opponent that you come up against that does have this rune, then you know about what window of time you have that you can use your own rune and then kind of counteract what they're trying to do with their own build. Sorcery cooldowns are the same. Learning what class they are from tagging them early on, like we said in the previous section, going to be a big boon to you, especially if they're a stone shaper. Just keep in mind that they might have 2 boulders, and each boulder is about 10 seconds. So you can use that information to sort of time your dashes to make sure that you're nowhere near where they want to throw those boulders if you happen to be in a fight with a stone shaper. Also, same thing for conduits. They have a 15-second timer on that lightning sorcery, as well as toxicologists have that 15-second timer on Vanishing Mist. They also have about a 7-second timer if they're running Shadow Step. So keep that in mind as well on the rune cooldowns. It'll definitely help you get a leg up. And then knowing that amount of time that you have a window to punish will better inform you on when to use your own movement to either close the distance or disengage if you find yourself under a bit too much pressure. And that is going to be the end of Spellbreak Academy episode 6 here. Quick recap and conclusion. Basically, just move with a purpose and be proactive. Try not to autopilot. Conserve your resources and know why you burn them if you need to. VOD review is very, very useful for knowing when to burn your resources and also knowing why you did what you did. So I definitely recommend VOD reviewing or even paying me a visit on the coaching side of things if you need to. Practice your class text and momentum transfers, especially sorcery canceling, and any of those class texts that I said earlier. Most of them can be found on YouTube, and you can also see streamers doing it as well. Most of the bigger ones will do it, so make sure you pay attention on Twitch and on YouTube. Pay attention to your opponent's early movements and look for signs of movement giveaways. Basically, just learn their tendencies, play some mind games with them. The more you know, the more you'll be able to dish out. And also be on the lookout for predictable movements and momentum locks. Be on the lookout for that floaty end of levitation animation, and be on the lookout for any sort of sorcery prep, and also just keep track of cooldowns. Very important, keep track of cooldowns. Now that is going to be the end of Spellbreak Academy episode 6 for movement. I hope this helps out your Spellbreak movement, and I hope that you learned something here today. If you did, like I said at the beginning, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can find more Spellbreak content on my channel. I do it a lot, and I make plenty of videos, especially advanced guides. Again, we're going to be getting into more of the beginner stuff here pretty soon, but you know, it is pretty nice to be able to put out these advanced guides for you guys, so that way you can stay at the top of your game, so that when Chapter 2 rolls around, you'll be able to stomp just like the rest of them. Guys, thank you again for joining in. I've been OSK. I'll be signing off. Y'all have a great day, and I'll see you all out there.